Welcome back, everyone. Today we wanted to do a quick video around how you should go about judging what temperature and what duration to set on your oven or your traditional OTG when you're baking various items, be it bread, cupcakes, cakes, or even if you're, baking or roasting meat or vegetables. I'm gonna take a sip of coffee over here. When we initially started baking, we were a little discouraged when things didn't turn out as well as we had hoped them to. If it was cakes, they either got burnt or they were undercooked and took forever to get done. When it came to baking bread, the initial couple of tries were absolute disasters, let me tell you that. Now, when I talk to a lot of my friends, a lot of them also have tried their hand at baking and gave up very easily. And the most common reason for someone giving up on baking is when they tried a recipe and followed it to the T, things did not turn out as expected. Things got burnt, and it was an absolute letdown for someone who was trying it out for the first time, and they simply gave up. Now, today what I want to talk about is how to go about setting the right temperatures and the right durations for your various recipes, primarily because every oven is unique and different. They have slight variations in temperature, and not just that, the ambient temperatures of the place where you live actually factor into how long something might take to cook. If you live in a really cold country, more often than not, your items are going to take slightly longer to cook, and you'd probably want to crank up the heat a little bit more. But if you live in the tropics, somewhere near the equator, you probably want to crank things down a little bit because the ambient temperature is already hot. So your oven heats up really well, and it actually struggles to maintain a constant temperature over there to a certain extent, which tends to burn things to a crisp if you're not careful. Like, we live in Hyderabad and it's really hot over here, but it's also very dry, right? So because the climate is dry, things tend to dry out much quicker in your oven than they would in, say, a more humid climate. Let's say you're living near the coast and there's a lot of humidity in the air. Whatever you bake, be it bread or cakes, which require to be porous, they tend to hold a lot more moisture than when you bake something following the exact same recipe, but in a city that has dry climate. Whenever you're experimenting with new recipes, always first learn your oven, right? If you're getting an OTG for the first time, if you're just starting out on your journey with baking and using your oven to bake or roast various dishes, spend a little time getting to understand how hot it gets and how long it takes to cook, because also the size of your oven matters. You've got a lot of varying sizes available in the market. For countries like India, you typically don't get built-in ovens in your kitchens. You get standalone units that you can put onto your countertops, right? And you get various sizes ranging from something as small as 18 liters to something as large as 60 liters. If I'm not wrong, the largest available size in India is 60 liters over there. And if you have to go beyond that, it has to be a built-in oven, right? So the size does matter a lot. If you get a smaller oven, it's probably gonna heat up a lot quicker and it's gonna bake things much faster. So if, say, your recipe for baking a cake is 180 degrees Celsius for 30 minutes, you might actually want to crank that down to 165 or 170 and bake it for 20 minutes first. And then use the toothpick test to see if your cake is done and use 5-minute increments over there to make sure that it gets cooked properly. Whereas if you get a much larger oven, say a 50-liter or a 60-liter oven in terms of their volume capacity, you can get away with following the actual instructions for the temperature and the duration of the item that you're cooking or baking. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about is the heating elements for your ovens. Most OTGs today come with the ability to heat from the top or the bottom, or from the top and the bottom simultaneously. And a lot of OTGs also come as convection ovens, where they have a built-in fan that creates a draft of air. So the heat with the air tends to cook your items faster and thoroughly through and through. This is really good, by the way, if you're roasting meat or baking meat in the oven. You get a really even heat distribution and an even cook through and through. Spend a little time to understand how your oven is heating from the top and the bottom. For example, our OTG is a 60-liter OTG, and we typically bake from the top and the bottom, and things turn out really fine. Whereas if you have a much smaller OTG, you'd want to probably heat it from the bottom element rather than the top. Otherwise, you'll end up with a crisp because those rods are much closer to the item that you're putting into the oven. Now, if we talk about typical temperatures for various items, if you're baking cakes, you'd usually get away with using 180 degrees plus or minus 10. If you're doing bread, you really need to crank your oven up, right? Bread really requires at least 220, 230 degrees. We bake bread at 250 degrees in the Dutch oven for about 25 minutes, then pop the lid off and then bake it for another 25 minutes at 200 degrees with the lid off. Chicken, you could cook at about 200 degrees for 20 minutes and that'll give you a really even cook through. And cupcakes, again, you typically want to bake them at 170 or 180 degrees. The other thing I wanted to mention was when you're in the market to purchase an OTG or an oven, try to pick one up which has a light on the inside. That way it eliminates what's being cooked inside and you also get to see how things are getting done. If you pick up a smaller one which does not have a light inside, you won't really know whether it's being cooked through properly until you actually open up the oven and take it out. And the problem with doing that is you're gonna let heat out, and when you put that back inside, it's gonna take a while for the heat to accumulate again properly to the right temperatures for you to get a good bake or a good cook through. Also, don't settle for the cheapest and the smallest oven that you find in the market. They might be really good from a price point perspective, but when it actually comes down to baking items for more than one person, they're really not the best for the job. They might work for heating up things or toasting, bread. Or if you want to make a small pizza, it will probably work out fine. But if you want to bake like a 1 kg cake for a friend or for your birthday or just for the heck of it, or if you want to grill a chicken or you want to make a nice roast salad, you'd probably want to get something that's anywhere between medium size to large. So anything which is around 30 liters capacity or upwards should be good if you want to bake more frequently. If you're a casual one-time baker for one person, then you can more than very well go ahead with one of the smaller ones. But if you want to go for more frequent baking for a larger quantity for say 2 or 3 more people, then do take one that's at least 30 liters or upwards in size. So yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to talk to you all about and encourage you to not give up on baking if you're trying it for the first time. Don't get discouraged if the first recipe that you try out is a disaster. You always have to keep trying it and adjusting your recipes in terms of the duration that you're baking things for and the temperature that you're setting till you get the perfect cut. All right, I hope you enjoyed this video and you're a little more encouraged to continue baking or start your journey with baking using a conventional oven. Stay tuned for more recipes and more everyday things from Samyara's Den. I'm Sam, signing off.